A word of apology to start this week's podcast. We had a little technical difficulty with the intro of Your Money, Your Wealth today, as you'll hear here.
Believe it or not, you literally, between what you take out and what you leave to your heirs, you could turn that $3,000 into $50 million, but that would be making a lot less than as in the past, because has produced about 5% a year more than the S&P 500.
Nah, just kidding. We just want you to stick around to find out which investment nationally known investing authority Paul Merriman says can turn $3,000 into $50 million. He also talks to Joe and Big Al about value versus growth companies, market timing, choosing the right mix of stocks, bonds, and other investments, and which stocks don't even beat Treasuries in the long term. Plus, the 10 best and worst places to retire, and ways to fund children's education in our newest awkwardly named segment, Catch Jason Thomas CFP by Surprise. Now, with no technical difficulties, here are Joe Anderson CFP and Big Al Clopine CPA.
You know, Alan, real estate prices are up again, and you just informed me that the 1031 exchange might be ex-nade. So this is like hot off the press news.
Yeah, this is according to Kiplinger tax letter. And here's what they're saying. They're saying that the days of deferring 100% of the gain through like-kind exchanges could be numbered if tax reform does happen. So just as a point of review, if you own a rental property, okay, let's say it costs $500,000 and you bought it for $100,000 years ago. So if you sell it, you have a $400,000 gain that you have to pay tax on. So
plus depreciation recapture.
Yeah, you bet. So what the IRS says is, you know what? If you buy another rental property for at least $500,000, you can transfer that gain into the property that you bought. And that's a 1031 exchange. So you're not necessarily getting out of the tax, but you are deferring it until you sell that second property. And of course, you may know that if you hold that second property your entire life, then your heirs, your beneficiaries get a step up in basis. And in that case, actually, nobody pays the tax. So the IRS, of course, or I should say our Congress and Senate, is looking for ways to increase the amount of money they take in taxes to offset lowering the tax rate. So this is something that may go away. And here's what they're saying, Joe, in this article, is that the Republican lawmakers are talking about this because it would be, like I said, it would be an offset against lowering tax rates. And even this was in 2014, the former House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Dave Camp, their tax proposal got rid of this altogether. And even Obama's plan, they proposed a cap of $1 million gain only. That was the Democratic plan. So, in other words, there's support on both sides for at least getting rid of it altogether, or at least diminishing its effectiveness. Because sometimes professional real estate investors, they may have an apartment building worth several $1 million, and they sell it and buy another one, and they pay no tax.
Why do you think that ever came about? It was like the Starker exchanges, right?
Yeah, well, because I guess the idea was that
you're buying another.
Yeah, you're exchanging money. You're exchanging property with another person, right? And then it's like, well, no money changed hands, so why should you have to pay taxes? I think that's why it originally came about. The Starker exchange basically paved the way for what's called a delayed exchange, which is the way most of them are done now. In other words, you sell your property first, and then within 45 days, you have to identify up to 3 target properties to buy. And 6 months from close of escrow, you actually have to buy one of those 3. And if you do that, and if you don't get your hands on the money, it has to go to a qualified intermediary, which is not you. If you get your hands on the money, in other words, if a check out of escrow is written to you, you've blown the exchange. It doesn't work. Or if you don't identify 3 properties within 45 days, it's a blown exchange. Or if you don't buy one of those 3 within 6 months, you have to pay that gain.
How about if I pick another one? No, it has to be the 3 that I chose, like in the 45 days that I have?
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's the law. And so it's very specific. So what I tell folks, if they want to do an exchange like that, you ought to pretty much know what you're doing when you're property sells, when the close of escrow happens. And I've done it 3 times myself, and one time happened down to the wire, and that was too stressful, but I did make those time frames. But I would say at the moment you have your house in escrow, in other words, you've sold it, your rental property, you've sold it, but it hasn't closed yet, you're looking like crazy, right? And then what I would try to do is buy the property you want to buy within that 45 days, so it's really clear. Right? That's what I would suggest.
You absolutely need to identify. But that's tough too, because they could sell before you sell yours, and
I know, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's why I think it pays to have your ducks in a row. Certainly at the time escrow closes, but that is the law. Escrow closes, the money goes to a third party. Then you have 45 days to identify 3 properties, and then you have another 4.5 months after that, or 6 months from close of escrow, to actually buy one of those 3. Now, there's a couple other ways. Like, you can identify as many properties as you want, as long as you buy. It's like 85 or 90% of those properties. I forget exactly what it is, but there's other ways to identify as well. Like if you sold a gigantic apartment and you want to buy 10 single-family homes, and you can identify, I think it's 11, and you have to buy 10 of them, something like that.
Got it.
So you can do that too.
What's a reverse exchange?
That gets trickier, because that's when you buy first and you sell second, and that creates a lot more risk for the intermediary, the exchange accommodator. So they'll charge you a lot more on that. It's not. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It's better to go in the right order: sell first and buy second. But if you're in a situation where that's not possible, it's called a reverse exchange, to where you can actually buy first and sell second, but you still have similar time frames to look out for.
There you go. 1031 exchange right off the bat. Just getting in some meat.
Oh, because usually it takes us a second hour before we talk about anything of substance. So today it's like, all right, let's get into this.
Hot.
Yeah.
Right now.
And I guess talking taxes, Steve Bannon is out, right? And he was thinking, he had sort of proposed raising the highest tax rate to as high as 44% to offset the cuts for the middle class. And what Kiplinger is saying is that now that he's gone, that's a lot less likely. We'd probably go back to the original idea of taking that 39.6 maximum tax rate and lowering it to, say, 35, 33, depending upon what actually happens. But that's, I'd say more than likely that's probably what the Republicans are going to shoot for. Now, but then here's the challenge. As we just said, it's like they're trying to make it revenue neutral so that we don't go into any more debt than we already are. So then you have to look at getting rid of other tax deductions. One of them, Joe, is the mortgage interest. And there's a lot of talk about that, about not necessarily that it would go away, but they would reduce it rather substantially.
Well, what is it now? 1.1 million of debt that you can write off?
Yeah. So let's say you have a house worth 1.5 million, let's just say, and as long as your loan is 1.1 million or lower, you can completely write off that interest. If it's higher than that, then not all of that interest is tax deductible. So they're talking about, I've heard lots of different ranges. The latest one I read is they think they might end up at about 500,000 or 600,000, something like that, so that any debt above that wouldn't be deductible.
Got it.
So we'll have to see. And the article that I read, Joe, talked about, it said that it really didn't affect that many homeowners. If they did that, it affect those that have the most money, and then supposedly the best ability to pay for this. That's kind of the idea. In my experience, a lot of times in California, those that have those kind of mortgage are stretched thin to get into those homes, and they really don't have a lot of room. I don't know about the rest of the country, but I've seen that a lot in California.
Well, the average cost here is a lot more expensive than most places.
Yeah, and then I was thinking, to do this more fair, they would have to have a different deductible amount depending upon where you live. Like the HUD loans, it depends upon the city that you're living in as to how much you can borrow.
Like what, FHA?
FHA, yeah. So anyway, but I doubt that they'll do that, because that would be a nightmare to administer. But that would be the only way to make it fair. How could you say 600,000 is the right number? Then everyone in, let's say, Iowa, for example, could probably deduct their mortgage, and half the people in California couldn't, right? So we'll see.
Stay tuned. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what. There's just a lot of talk now of maybe now the focus is on tax reform, because there's been a lot of talk with a lot of different things that in regards to your overall retirement, that would be eliminated. Net unrealized depreciation is one. That is where you can take your company stock outside of your 401k plan, move it into a brokerage account. You do pay tax on the basis of that stock, but if you worked for that company for 30 years, which we see a lot of, those big blue chip companies that, the match was in the company stock. And so they have very low basis, but the stock appreciated over 30 years and they never sold it, or maybe their full 401k is full of that stock. Where we've done that transaction quite a bit is to move the stock into a brokerage account, and they're subject to capital gains rate versus ordinary income if they kept it in the retirement account. So that could go way back to our Roth IRA contributions we've talked about, so that's taking a non-deductible IRA contribution and then converting it into a Roth to avoid it's just if your income limits are higher than the contribution limits. So there's, kind of a backdoor way to put the money in. Maximizing the amount that you can actually have in a retirement account.
Just so we get to a certain point and then no more.
Right. You've accumulated a couple $1,000,000 in your retirement account, and no, you can no longer contribute to that account. There's a lot of talk about, eliminating the tax deduction entirely for retirement accounts and making everything after-tax contributions because of the billions of dollars, I guess, that the IRS looks at and says, all right, well, this is missed revenue. But they're missing the boat. I mean, I don't think with any of these strategies, it helps the retiree. You know what I mean? There's other areas to go after. When you look at the average balance of a retirement account, $100,000, let's say. Right. The median is a lot less than that. So half of the population has pennies. A third of the population has zero. And then, all right, well, let's go after, just deductibilities or contributions. I don't know. I guess that wouldn't necessarily hurt lower income because these should probably go after tax anyway. The stretch IRA is another big one that potentially could leave us.
Let me kind of set the stage, which is when you inherit an IRA from someone other than your spouse. So so this is a non-spousal IRA. So maybe this is your mom or dad. You inherit the IRA. Then what happens is you need to set it up, specifically set it up as titling correctly, and you actually want to talk to your custodian on changing the title. And here's how you're supposed to do it. This is John Smith, who got an IRA from Laura Jackson. Sorry, other way around. Anyway, John Smith, deceased March 14th, 2016, IRA for the benefit of Laura Jackson. So you put the deceased person's name, the date that they passed away, that it's an IRA for the benefit of yourself. That's how you properly title what's called a stretch IRA. And then you have to start taking required minimum distributions. And those required minimum distributions need to start by December 31st of the year after the person that passed away. So if someone passes away this year, you inherit that non-spousal IRA, you got to start taking required minimum distributions by December 31st of next year based upon your age. Generally, although there are some caveats there, but you do it based upon your age. So if you're 20 years old, and if the table says you're supposed to live till 80, that means there's 60 years to go. You take the IRA balance, you divide it by 60, and that's what you need to withdraw. It doesn't matter what age. In fact, a lot of people don't realize they're younger than 59 and a half, but they still have to take that required distribution.
Yeah, all non-spouse beneficiaries have to take money out of the retirement account. They want to recycle that money. They don't want to sit it in the account so it can continue to defer for another 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So all non-spouses need to take a required distribution based on their life expectancy. But the problem is that the titling has to change, where sometimes you would think it's like, well, it's a retirement account. Well, all right, well, should I roll it into my own retirement account? Because I can take the brokerage account and move it into my own brokerage account.
Yeah, that's a common conception that you ought to be able to do that.
Right. But a retirement account needs to stay in the deceased's name. So if you ever are, if your parents have retirement accounts and you are inheriting those, just understand that be careful with those accounts, because once you blow that thing up, it's very, very difficult to put Humpty Dumpty together again. It's once that egg is cracked, it's done, and it's fully taxable, and it could really blow you up. So be careful, because Al and I have seen it so many times where the titling planning wasn't done correctly. Maybe a trust was named as the beneficiary, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, what do I do if the trust is the beneficiary, and then now there's multiple beneficiaries, but there was a charity involved, or a spouse was, but with spouses specifically, do not name the trust the primary. Name your spouse the primary, unless you don't want the money to go to the spouse and she or he signs off on it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Which they do have to sign off on it.
Yes, it's because it gets a little bit fuzzy. You want to make sure, because the beneficiary form is one of the most important documents in regards to estate planning, because that trumps all other estate planning documents. So if you have a living trust, but you don't fill out the beneficiary form, then it goes to the estate. It could be stuck in probate, but you have the trust, but you didn't name. So there's all sorts of things that you absolutely want to make sure that you nail down.
Well, you do, Joe, and you talked about naming a trust. Let's say you and your spouse have passed away. You've named the trust as the secondary beneficiary. So then it's like 4 kids split the trust 4 ways, except 1% first goes to charity. So you have a non-person beneficiary, which means you cannot do a stretch. As a matter of fact, in that case, the entire IRA needs to be distributed within 5 years.
So with proposed tax reform, the 1031 exchange and the stretch IRA could both be on the chopping block. To find out what else is being considered, visit the white paper section of the Learning Center at yourmoneyyourwealth.com and download the white paper called Tax Reform, Trump versus House GOP. Find out how income tax, estate tax, and business tax may change and whether your tax strategies are at risk. Since you're already at the Learning Center at yourmoneyyourwealth.com, download the free Estate Plan Organizer. It'll help make it easier for your beneficiaries, spouse, non-spouse, or otherwise, to carry out your wishes upon your departure. Find all the relevant information, fill out the forms completely, keep them up to date, and store them in a safe, easily accessible place for your heirs. Articles, webinars, must-watch videos, and white papers on tax reform and estate planning. It's all available to you for free in the Learning Center at yourmoneyyourwealth.com.
Alan, we got our good friend Paul Merriman back on the show.
We do, and I am so excited because, we've got, I'd say our short list of people we really enjoy talking to. Paul's right at the top.
Why are you kissing ass?
Because I do that every week. So the guest will be nice to us.
Oh, well, Paul Merriman's been a legend in our business for many, many years. It's always a great pleasure to talk to Paul. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's great to be with you.
I read this study, and I know that you've read it. What do you think about this? Study shows 96% of stocks don't meet Treasuries in the long term.
You know how that, just so people understand what that means, 4% of the companies that have ever gone public since 1926, 4% have virtually made all of the real, that 10% we always talk about that the market makes. Turns out it's that very small number of companies that are helping that happen. If you take all the rest of the companies, the 96%, and you look at the average return of that group, it's the same as T-bill rates. So the thing it teaches us, and I had lunch with the professor who did that, worked on that paper, just to confirm, it teaches us that if we own all of the companies, rather than hiring somebody who's trying to find the next Microsoft, and remember Microsoft has been a dog since about 2000 if you want to look at the expectations, but if you think that you're going to find those people, those great companies, that's fine, but it looks like almost nobody does, and in fact you'd be better owning all the companies rather than any part of them, and that, I think, is magic for people who don't want to take much risk.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought it was, I knew it was a small percentage that drives most of the returns, but I didn't know it was that low. 4%, that just seems crazy to me.
And that's tricky, by the way, because that includes one of the most profitable companies ever was General Motors. So in that study, a lot of that return came from General Motors. Well, you know the old saw that the idea is you buy and hold an individual stock for the rest of your life, and the longer you own it, the more you're likely to make. It actually turns out that the longer you own it, the higher the probability that you're not going to make much money. Look at Sears.
Right.
Yep.
Kodak.
And this is such a reason to own the whole market.
Yeah, but Paul, don't you think some people out there try to profess they can pick that 4%, so you should invest with them?
Well, those are the people who keep buying lottery tickets, I suspect.
Right.
But the bottom line is there is no evidence. There is no evidence that we can find in the academic research that somebody knows how to pick those stocks before they become famous. And in fact, there was one study many years ago that Morningstar did that they looked at successful mutual funds thinking they probably did something, that maybe they overloaded their position with some company that made them famous and made them outperform the market. It turned out that these big performers that these funds had that made them famous were not their best picks. They were also ran stocks that they put into the portfolio because they had to have a lot of diversification. So not even the big winners, turns out, really knew what they were doing.
Well, I think everyone has this backwards when it comes to investing. They should be investing for their goals, right? So what target rate of return do they need to generate to do all the things that they want to do? But that greed factor comes in where they want to get a little bit more return, and then they start doing things that are, probably is not going to get them the return that they want or anticipate by picking individual stocks or trying to time the markets. And right now, I mean, we hear markets all-time highs. Is this a good time to, maybe take some chips off the table? What do I do? How do I invest in all-time high markets? I mean, what advice would you give our listeners with that?
Well, if you're going to try to pick that point, this is what is called market timing. And I've yet to find anybody in this industry, except for people who make a living doing market timing, but except for people who have that bias, almost everybody, in fact, all the very famous investors, the Warren Buffetts, the Peter Lynch's, the Templetons, these people all claim not to have any idea how to time the market and believed that it's all about the long term. Now, having said that, these are very wealthy people who can afford to sit around and watch their portfolio go down 50% and wait for it to come back. And a lot of people don't have that kind of luxury. But those people have got to be smart and have a significant amount of their money in something that's going to protect them against the downside, not a market timing system, but instead the appropriate amount of fixed income that's going to protect them to be whatever their risk tolerance is so they can get that benchmark return. And the benchmark return, you're right, is what rate of return do you need to get where you're trying to go? It has nothing to do with anybody else in the world but you.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And what about that? What about stocks and bonds, and how should people go about figuring out how much stocks versus bonds?
Well, I have a table that in fact, I've got a number of them now that people can go to paulmerriman.com and look under best advice, and there's a fine-tuning table there. And what I do in that table is I show different combinations of stocks and bonds. And here's what I find so interesting, is every time you add another 10% equities to the bond portion of the portfolio, you add about 0.5 to 0.6% to the return. And, of course, along with that, and I've got it on the table, is how much more money you're going to lose in the worst of times. I'm 73. I'm 50-50 stocks and bonds. That means I am expecting to lose 20 to 25% of my portfolio in the next big bear market. I've signed on for that. My wife has signed on for that. And if I'm not willing to accept that risk, maybe I should be 40% equities or 30% equities. But if I'm going to wish something is going to happen, that's a meaningless exercise, because wishing doesn't do anything. And you guys know as well as I do that all we have to go on is the past and what the past looks like, and sometimes it's really bad. and we got to be prepared for it.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be bad in the future. We just don't know when. And so I like how you said that. It's like, all right, well, here, I'm willing to lose X amount of dollars. I signed off on it. I'm anticipating this. My wife signed off on it. So when it happens, it's expected versus being shocked and like, oh, my God, I can't believe my portfolio did this. And I think that's another issue of most investors where they're confused maybe of what type of bonds that they actually hold. Are they long-term? Are they short-term? Are they high-grade? Are they junk? Or what type of stocks do they own? I mean, is it all large growth? Do they have international emerging markets? And they might not understand how those react in certain market, scenarios. And then basically, then it all boils down to their goals again. How much income needs to be derived from the overall portfolio.
Well, I think that if we can get, and when I as you guys know, I'm retired. I don't do investment advice anymore one-on-one. But when I did, I sat with every prospect, and I said, okay, I'm going to go through a series of forks in the road because you're either going to make these decisions by design or by default. I think by design is better than by default. And I make them, like you say, do you want to be all in large cap growth companies? Oh, let me show you a 10-year period where large cap growth companies absolutely stink. And if that's all you had in your portfolio, that you probably would have been lost half of your money if you were living on it during that 10-year period. Maybe you would have lost more than half. Now, how would you feel if you added some large cap value to go along with that? Let's see what happens there so we can make good choices. Because if you don't ask people to think about more than one thing at a time, they make great decisions. It is when they are expected to make 20 decisions at one time that their brain doesn't know how to do that, and they don't know. It seems pretty simple when you look at it from our side, but they don't know how to go through those 20 decisions to figure out how to make a legitimate bottom line decision about what's right for them and their family. And by the way, you guys are in the business now. I think it's the toughest thing in the business is you're sitting with a husband and a wife or a couple. One is aggressive and one is conservative, and you're trying to go through that decision tree. It's tough because you're trying to get two very different people to come up with one answer.
That's true.
So have you made those 20 decisions that Paul Merriman just mentioned? What are your retirement goals, and is your retirement strategy designed to meet them? Can your portfolio withstand a stress test? Visit yourmoneyyourwealth.com and sign up for a free financial assessment with a certified financial planner. Find out if you're on track for retirement. How much money will you need? What Social Security strategies are available to you? How much income can you get from your portfolio? Make sure that retirement strategy is aligned with your retirement goals. Sign up for a free 2-meeting assessment with a certified financial planner at yourmoneyyourwealth.com.
Welcome back to the program. Show's called Your Money, Your Wealth. Joe Anderson here, certified financial planner, alongside Alan Clopine. We're talking to Paul Merriman. Hey, Paul, let's break things down simply because I think we talk about large companies, growth companies, value companies, small. Just give us a rundown. What is a growth company? What is a value company? So people understand what they're invested in, or maybe they should venture into another asset class, maybe that they haven't invested in or don't know anything about.
Well, growth companies are the ones most people know because they are successful. They typically are in an industry that is considered to be a good growth industry for the future, and they typically have access to money to grow, and they typically have good management. And there's a number of keys that can put a company on top, and we can think of Facebook, we could think of Google, we could think of Amazon. Now, value tend to be companies that aren't as popular today as they may have been at one time. They could be great companies, but they're, let's call them out of favor for some reason, or just not the cutting edge companies. And that might be Exxon, or that could be AT&T, it could be the Bank of America, it could be any number of decent companies, but they're just not the powerhouses of today. And I still think this is fascinating, is that our hearts want to believe that those great companies like Google and Facebook, that's where the big money is going to be made, and that in these more doggy, out-of-favor companies, that they're not likely to do as well. And why wouldn't we want to be where the action is? And the academics just turned this whole industry upside down when they did all the research, and then were able to put it on the table. There it is. Those out-of-favor companies, not only do they tend to be less volatile in normal times, but they give over the long term a higher rate of return. And people say, well, how could it be that a company that's out of favor and not as good as another company would make a higher rate of return? And it turns out, at least what the academics tell us, that this is simply a matter that these investments are, in fact, more risky. And it's important for investors to understand they are more risky because those companies in a catastrophic environment, I'm talking depression now, not just a recession, those out-of-favor companies tend to pile up bigger losses than those better positioned growth companies. So there is a condition under which those value companies don't do as well. But if you look at all the years going back the last 90 years, in most of the years when the market is up, turns out it's the value companies, not the growth companies, that produce the bigger returns.
What is the delta on that with your latest research of overperformance of value companies versus growth?
Well, it kind of depends on how far back you want to go.
Let's go 90 years.
Pardon?
90 years.
90 years? I think it's about 2% advantage to value. Oh, but it gets better. I did an article about how to turn $3,000 into $50 million. Oh. And this is for a newborn child. And all you do is put that money into small cap value, not big cap, not large companies, but put that money into small cap value and just, in essence, let it sit there in a Roth IRA when the kid is old enough and working and you can actually match this $3,000 or whatever it's grown to. Believe it or not, you literally, between what you take out and what you leave to your heirs, you could turn that $3,000 into $50 million, but that would be making a lot less than small cap value has in the past, because small cap value has produced about 5% a year more than the S&P 500.
Yeah, if you look at a growth of $1, and I use this quite a bit, is that most people's portfolios, they buy what they know, or, hey, all we hear is the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones, and so they use that as a benchmark. And, we believe that it's very difficult to time the market, almost impossible, but it is probable that it could happen, right? Or picking the right stock. But we also want to make sure that we're beating the market. I mean, I'm not afraid to say it. It's like, I want to beat the market. But then you look at, well, what market are you trying to beat? Well, if you want to compare to the S&P 500, yeah, small value will crush it. Because if you got $1, or let's say you have $100 invested in 1927, today it would be worth what? About $600,000. You got that same $100,000 or $100 invested in small value stocks, it's going to be like $7.8 million. I mean, it's $7 million more. So when you look at constructing portfolios, and I think you do a really good job of educating with this, it's like, all right, well, here, we want to dampen the volatility of the portfolio by maybe having a little bit more fixed income in the portfolio, more bonds, safe, high grade, short duration. But with the stock selection that you're using, make sure that you understand risk and expected return and use the right asset classes to kind of boost your return over the long term. I think it's genius.
Well, and it came right out of the academic community, this whole idea of the advantage of small cap and value, and the advantage of combining asset classes. And for those people who don't want to take more risk, here's the beauty. You can build the equity part of your portfolio with about 70% equity and about 30% bonds, and have the same return as the S&P 500 without any bonds.
Right.
And so if you can get the same unit of return and take less risk, you're supposed to do that. Now, having said that, and having been on a diet since the 5th grade, I know what I was supposed to have eaten, and I never did. But had I eaten what I was supposed to, I'd probably live another 20 years. As it is, I'm going to pay the price for having done what my heart wanted instead of my head.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, which is patience and doing the right thing, because sometimes this value premium it's not there for a year or two or even 5 years. Sometimes growth stocks are better than small value over a 5-year period, 6-year period, and you have to have enough patience to know that this strategy works, but it may not be every year.
Here's a number you'll love. If you look at the return of the S&P 500 versus small cap value going back 50 years, the average difference in return is 17%. That's huge. I mean, if you expect your portfolio to look like the S&P 500, if you happen to be more value-oriented, your portfolio is going to return substantially different returns, and guess where the big difference comes? It's not on the downside. It's on the upside. But that difference, I don't mean to suggest that small cap value makes 17% more, because sometimes the S&P 500 does better.
Right.
But they're very different asset classes in terms of how their prices act.
Paul, where can people find this research, and where can people get more information? You have great stuff out there. You have awesome books, literature, blogs, videos. Where can they find you?
Well, paulmerriman.com. I have absolutely nothing to sell, no advertising. This is the work of a foundation that I set up after I sold my investment advisory firm back in 2012. So it's all it's there for is to give people more information. And it doesn't hurt, even if you got an advisor, it doesn't hurt to read this stuff to make sure your advisor's got his or her head on straight.
Yeah, I think Joe and I need to read them more.
Paul, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Life's good? Retirement's good?
I tell you, I'm just having a ball, and I was only going to work till I was 85 on this stuff,
Right.
But I went back and spent an hour and a half with John Bogle back in Pennsylvania in his office. I'm now going all the way. If I could make it, I'm gonna work longer than Jack Bogle worked.
Good for 88. You. That's great. So we'll be
Thanks, guys.
We'll be interviewing you for the next 25 years. It sounds
God,
like.
I hope so.
That's Paul Merriman, folks. We got to take a break. Show's called Your Money, Your Wealth.
Your Money, Your Wealth isn't just a podcast, it's also a TV show. Check out Your Money, Your Wealth on YouTube to watch brand new shows on banking on your house in retirement with reverse mortgages, creating income streams in retirement, and the A's, B's, C's, and D's of Medicare, including Medicare mistakes.
I wonder how many mistakes we just made in the show. I mean, seriously. I don't even know what B means. Is that hospitalization? That's why we got this guy right here, Jason Thomas.
Don't miss the Your Money, Your Wealth TV show. Just search YouTube for Pure Financial Advisors and Your Money, Your Wealth. And check back often. We're always adding new shows. Time now for Big Al's List. Every week, Big Al Clopine scours the media to find the best tips, do's and don'ts, mistakes, myths, and advice to improve your overall financial picture in handy bullet point format. This week, the top 10 best and worst places to retire.
What is this gauge on? Is it weather? Is it crime?
All the above. Well, first of all, it's the 150 largest cities. So this isn't all cities. It's just the 150 largest.
And out of the 150, here's the top 10?
Yeah, here's the top 10. And it's basically ranked on things like retire friendliness, availability of healthcare facilities, recreational activities like golf, museums, and wait for it, bingo. That's a big one, apparently, on this list. In-home service, overall cost of living. Number one place to live, Orlando, Florida.
Number one,
Orlando, Florida.
I've lived in Oviedo, Florida.
Yeah.
That's right outside of Orlando.
Right.
And
Now, there's a lot of theme parks in Orlando, so plenty to do, I suppose.
yes, I used to lived in Oviedo. I went to University of Florida, which is in Gainesville.
Right.
But a buddy of mine from high school was going to University of Central Florida, which is in Oviedo.
Okay.
Which is outside of Orlando.
There you go.
And I was like, there's no way I'm going to University of Central Florida.
Right.
But I lived there for a year to get in-state residency.
Oh, you did? Because it was cheaper? Or
Well, out-of-state residence
yeah, I know.
tuition versus...
Right. I'm saying cheaper than Gainesville. Or because you had a friend there. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I was close to Orlando.
Right.
Which is a bigger city than Gainesville is a college town.
Yeah, and you went, Disneyland? Got an
No.
annual pass and SeaWorld? And
I worked at a bar. It was in Church Street Station. It was called Howl at the Moon Saloon.
Really?
Yep. It was a dual piano bar.
Oh, I love those.
It was like the Shout House.
Yes. Yeah, I love that place.
Yeah. I worked there at night. I also worked at Structure, which is I think it's a defunct clothing store.
Okay.
And that was the worst experience of my life.
What did you do there? Sell clothes?
Yeah, sold clothes.
Oh, I can't imagine.
I was on the floor.
Was it suits or
No,
or
it
just
was
regular clothes? Someone
khakis and shirts.
Some lady comes in. I'd like some underwear.
No. It was men's clothing.
Men's clothing. Okay.
It's like a Banana Republic.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Familiar?
Sure. Yeah.
But all right, so I was on the floor. I made it, I think, like 2 weeks, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because I'd be like, oh, this vest would look really good with those pants. Oh, look at this. Oh, you need a mock turtleneck or whatever. It was.
So I can imagine that.
So I was like, I can't do this.
Right.
So then I worked in the back. I just stocked.
Okay, you just carried boxes.
Yeah, I want to do
And
man
open.
stuff.
I don't want to be the guy in front.
And again, I would have to dress up in all this like structure stuff. So it was like
Right.
sweaters and things like that. But it's
100
Orlando.
degrees.
It's 100 degrees and I'm sweating. And it was like I had to wear like maroon collared shirts with like a sweater over it.
Do you have any pictures of those days?
No, that was. I'm trying to.
Should go on our website.
I'm trying to purge this.
All these years later,
Yeah.
still there.
And then I worked at a country club. So here was my schedule. I would get up at 4:00 in the morning, and I'd work at Icona Country Club, right?
Okay.
And so it was a nice golf club. It was close to my house, and I was.
Now that's a manly job.
yeah.
That you felt you had pride in.
Yes. So I'd whip the greens, clean the greens off after they mowed them, and then I would, do the sand traps and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was from 4:30 until probably like 10:30 in the morning.
Okay.
Right. And then from there, I'd go home.
Yeah.
And then I would change into
on
my
your
structure outfit.
turtlenecks.
My turtlenecks.
In the middle of the day.
And then I would drive an hour to Orlando with this. I had a 1984 Honda Accord with no air conditioning.
Oh, boy.
And so by the time I got to Structure,
You were
I'm
dripping.
drenched with sweat. So then I would have to buy a new shirt once I got there. So everything that I earned from Structure, I went right back into Structure to buy their stupid clothes.
And then after you wore it once, you had to throw it away because
Pretty
of all the
much,
sweat.
pretty much.
Yeah.
And then from there, I went to the bar, and I was like a, kind of a bouncer slash, guy. If you wanted a song that the piano guy sang, you would give that little ticket to me.
Oh, that's what you
And
did.
then I would go up and put it in
Got
the
it.
dish and say, hell yeah.
Got it.
She's giving you $5.
Yep.
Play a little Billy Joel.
Got to work up to waiter. We're at that level yet.
Yeah, so I did that for a year,
Wow.
and I got my residency, and I said, get me the hell out of Oviedo. And so I moved to Gainesville.
So the second one is right down the road, Tampa.
Oh,
So if you had to pick Orlando or Tampa, what would you pick?
Tampa.
Why?
Because there's Clearwater Beach.
Yeah, it's on the
nice.
coast. It's on the West Coast, the Gulf
It's on
side.
the Gulf side.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Orlando's right in the middle. It's so touristy, and
Yeah.
I've never been to Disneyland
Yeah.
or World or whatever's there. And,
You didn't do that?
No.
Living there a year? Yeah.
No, I went to like Universal Studios once with this girl. That was fun. But
Right.
I
it.
like Tampa, Clearwater Beach. That's nice.
Okay. All right. So you picked Tampa over Orlando. Number 3 is also down the road on the other side, Miami.
Yeah, Miami's fun.
Yeah, Miami's cool. I could live there.
Yeah, I don't know if I could live
in
there.
the summer. It would be pretty rough.
Dude, it's little nuts. It's
You think?
Oh, I would never live in Miami.
I only went there once. It was in August, which is not the time to go. But we went on a cruise to save money because in August they're really cheap.
Yeah.
And we were there like 2 or 3 days beforehand. And I went on a jog. They got that boardwalk. I went on a jog, and I got whatever distance, and then I was going to turn around. And so I got kind of, I don't know, a mile and a half in, whatever I did. And I realized, first of all, I'm not going to make it back. And secondly, I actually might die on this hike. So I ran into a hotel all sweaty and sat there for like a half an hour.
Yeah.
And then Ann called me, "Where are you?" "Well, I'm at the Marriott." "What are you doing there?"
Well, I almost died on this jog. No, I could never live in Miami's fun for like a weekend.
Number 4 is Scottsdale, Arizona.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Scottsdale. I was just in
You're not?
Scottsdale. Yeah, recently
I like
too.
Scottsdale. I mean, not in the summer. Again, same problem.
It's
Too
hot.
hot.
It's Haiti.
But the rest of the year is pretty good. Lots of good golf. Golf courses are great. That to me, I love that the green grass against the stark desert. I think that's a cool look.
Yeah, it is.
But you still wouldn't pick that one.
Yeah.
Number 5 is yet another place you've lived, Atlanta.
Atlanta, hot Atlanta.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in the Darlington when I lived in Atlanta, Georgia.
okay.
Because, right, you graduate from the University of Florida. And is this all the places that I've been to? What the hell is going on
It
here?
is.
I love living with retarees.
That's no wonder you like to help retirees.
No wonder
for
why
your
I'm in the
career.
profession.
Yeah.
I just love hanging out with the retirees.
Yeah.
Oh, Atlanta. That was my, I thought I was going to make it big in Atlanta because that's the New York of the South.
Right.
And my girlfriend at the time, she was from Daytona Beach, Florida.
Okay.
And she wanted to stay south, close to the family. And I said, well, let's go to Atlanta. She's like, sure. I lived in like low-income housing.
Right.
It was awful. 5 cops got shot in my...
Really?
Like the day I left.
Wow.
It was craziness.
Oh.
It was right across the street from the Piedmont Hospital,
got out
right
just-
on Peachtree Avenue.
You got out just in time, maybe.
Yeah. And so my brother came. All I had was, I didn't have a bed. I slept in my suit garment bag because I
Right.
only had one suit, one shirt,
Yeah.
and some crappy shoes and a belt, right?
Yeah.
And so that was my work attire every single day. And I lived in low-income housing in hot Atlanta,
Right.
in the Darlington. And so I had some stuff. My brother and I drove a Jeep Wrangler back then, right? No top.
Right.
Really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
So I drove the Jeep Wrangler from Atlanta back to Minnesota
Right.
with my brother.
Okay.
And so I have this little cart full of all of my belongings.
Sure.
So it was in like a bag.
Okay.
And so I'm going down the freight elevator. And then this one guy goes, "Yeah, man, congratulations." I go, "What?" He's like, "You graduated to Darlington. Good for you for getting out of
You're
here."
out. You're one of the few that
Yeah,
made it
you're
out.
one of the few that made it out. It was like a jail cell.
Wow. Okay.
All right, what's next on the list?
Well, we got Salt Lake City.
Nope, never been.
Yeah, I've been. I haven't lived there. Honolulu.
Oh,
Number
that's a cool
7.
place, yeah.
Yeah, now there's a million other places in Hawaii I'd rather live, but I love Hawaii. And number 8 is Denver. I actually could live in Denver. I like Denver. I like Colorado.
Now, I like John Denver.
You do, yes. Well, I do too. I wouldn't have guessed you would like John Denver.
Love John Denver.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, well, me too. 9 is Austin, Texas.
Ooh, I
which
like Austin.
You've been?
I have.
I have not. I keep hearing it's the place to be in Texas. And then number 10 is Las Vegas. And it turns out, actually, a lot of retirees like Las Vegas because when you live in the suburbs...
What, you just smoke cigarettes and gamble your Social Security check away?
See, Vegas is a regular town in the suburbs. And then when you want that craziness, once every other week, you can go have dinner and, throw a couple of bets down. But I think the retirees, what I've heard is they hardly ever go to the Strip. That's what you and I do when we go there. Anyway, that's my list.
Very interesting. Well, I learned a lot about myself with your list today.
Yeah, half the first half are all places you know intimately.
I guess that I actually have residence on.
Right. You want to hear the 10 worst? We'll do this quickly, but I'm sure you're curious.
I am very curious.
Because we'll get to the worst one at the end. Number 141 is Rancho Cucamonga.
Oh, really?
In California.
Number 1, that's the worst, or no, that's number 10?
That's 141.
Oh.
We're going to 150.
Okay.
Right? And then, actually, the first 5 are in California. So here we go. Fontana, 142. Modesto, 143. That's Central Valley. Stockton, also Central Valley.
Awful.
144. Fresno, 145. That's where my uncle lives. That's where he retired.
Well,
Well, can't be all bad. Number 146 is Detroit.
ooh, the D.
Yeah, it usually scores low on these kinds of things. Yeah. Number 147 is Worcester, Massachusetts.
Worcester.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 148 is a place where my uncle spent his entire career teaching, San Bernardino.
Okay.
Now, he lives in Redlands. He's not a San Bernardino. He's a Redlands guy. But Anyway, then we've got number 149, Providence, Rhode Island.
Huh.
Yeah. Any guess on 150? The worst place, according to this study, nerdwallet.com.
The worst place to retire?
It's on the East Coast.
East Coast, worst place to retire ever. I don't know. New York City.
That didn't make the top 10 or the bottom 10, but it's in New Jersey. Newark, New Jersey.
Oh, why?
Which, I don't know. It doesn't say. Well, actually, let's see what it does say. It says partly because taxes, higher cost of living, and lesser quality of life. So clearly they don't have enough bingo.
I guess
to go
I
around.
would imagine. I mean, New York is pretty expensive. New York City?
Yeah. Well, that's why it didn't make the top 10. It's because it's too expensive.
Well,
and that's why San Diego didn't make it either.
What is San Diego?
I don't know. I didn't get the list. All I have is...
Oh, you top and bottom?
That's all I got in this article, so I don't know.
So our crack research team just kind of did an abbreviated version there.
Yeah, so I don't know.
I found that list, and I can tell you that San Diego is the 37th best place to retire. Must be all the bingo halls we've got. You can find that full list, too. It's in the show notes for today's podcast at yourmoneyyourwealth.com. While you're there, check out the white papers, articles, webinars, and over 400 video clips on tax planning, investing, retirement planning, small business strategies, estate planning, Social Security, and our new Medicare video series, and more. It's all waiting for you, all free, at yourmoneyyourwealth.com. If you need more help, you can always email us at info@purefinancial.com or pick up the phone and call 888-99-GOALS. That's 888-994-6257.
Oh, we got Jason Thomas.
See,
we're trying to catch him by surprise.
This is the new segment called Catch Jason Thomas by Surprise. And there's no surprise at all in this, Jason Thomas. How are you, sir?
Well, except he doesn't know what we're going to ask him. Oh. That's a surprise.
Well, I guess so, yeah.
Jason, tell our listeners who the heck you are.
I am the education specialist at Pure. I do some of the videos and teach some of the classes that we have, and I'm up in the LA area.
Are you? Do you have any credentials that we should be aware of?
Oh, yeah. I'm a CFP, or a Certified Financial Planner, and I've been in the industry about 10 years and used to teach in programs for people that wanted to get that designation as well.
So you taught advisors how to be advisors, is what you're saying?
We'll see if that actually ended up happening. But yeah, some of those people have kind of stayed in touch with me as they've kind of gone along through the industry. But yeah, I started one of those programs at the University of Redlands about 4 years ago, and was pretty interesting.
Well, since Deb ruined our segment,
the surprise.
I am going to just off the cuff question for you, because I like the element of surprise with this.
Yes.
With the phone ringing.
Yeah. And then we don't even know
and then he's going to be like, who the hell's this? And they'll be like, hey, Jason, you're live on radio. So what videos are you doing now? Did we get to college funding?
Yeah, that one's, we're in the middle of that one now.
All right, let's talk about it. What are some ways that people can fund their children's education? Go.
Well, first is start thinking as soon as possible, and some of the common plans are 529 plans or college savings plans. You have the option to use your own retirement account if you'd like and take withdrawals for a child, but that's kind of a dicey one because you want to make sure that you're still in shape for your own retirement if you do something like that. A lot of people like savings bonds also. It's not as likely to get a huge rate of return, but, it's fixed, and you will avoid taxes on the interest if it's used for education later on. On the college savings plans, which are probably the most popular option, those 529s, whatever growth occurs, you would also not be taxed later on if they're used for education expenses. So,
what are the pros and cons of 529 plans? Because there's a lot of talk of, all right, well, here, you should fund a 529 plan for your kids' education. Why wouldn't I want to fund a 529 plan?
There are some disadvantages. For example, if the state that you live in doesn't give you any benefit for doing it, then you would have a less advantageous situation than people in other states. Like California doesn't give you a tax incentive to do it, while some states do. But the upside of that is that you can just buy a plan from any state and choose whichever one has the investments that you prefer or the lower fees or something like that. There are limitations on how often you can mix the investments up inside the account, so they are a little more restrictive than what you would be able to do in, say, your own IRA, for example. So you really got to find one that you like it kind of as is, rather than assuming that you're going to tailor it to be your own thing.
What about prepaid tuition?
That can be an option for a lot of people at state institutions, but not every state has a prepaid tuition for their state university network. So that's a state-by-state basis also, and it kind of restricts the choices available later on. So that is substantially less common and less popular than doing a 529 plan. Basically, the advantage of doing that would be that you're locking in today's rates versus tomorrow's, and we know college costs are increasing substantially more than inflation. So that would be the game plan, but you're limiting risk, and you may not have the option to do it anyway, depending on where you live.
And so what happens in that plan if your son or daughter doesn't actually go to college?
There are some refunding provisions, but it really depends on the actual state that you're going to, and you're probably not going to get as good of a deal on your refunding as what you would be if you were paying for the actual increased tuition over time. And in addition to that,
You're on the spot, Jason.
It's just not something that you really want to be confined to doing anyway. That's money that you didn't put somewhere else, is what I was going to kind of say, just the opportunity.
But you can't.
Are you at lunch or something? Did someone walk by? Or was that a brain fart? What happened there?
There was a very attractive individual that just kind of diverted my attention elsewhere to something a little more.
Yes, besides prepaid college tuition. All right, here's my last question, because this segment was supposed to be set up as let's call Jason on the spot, where he doesn't know who's calling him. But here's what happened. Deb, our producer, called him and said, "Hey, Joe wants to talk to you and put you on the radio." And then so I'm sure you ran to your office and got all sorts of material where I wanted to see you at McDonald's. So,
well, I'm gonna put that number in my phone to make sure that I'm not surprised in the future, even if the game is kind of improved.
We can use other numbers.
We got lots of numbers here, brother. All right, so Jason, I am not married, and I do not have any prospects of marriage at this point in my life. But let's say I, at one point, would like to get married and have a child, and I went to University of Florida. And can I call University of Florida right now and lock in some tuition for Junior, even though he is unborn and I don't even know who his mother is yet? What do you think?
The short answer is I don't think so, because you would not. They're going to say we don't want that future Gator.
Oh, wow!
No, I'm just kidding. No, they would be happy to have the future Anderson generation, but as far as the funding of that, it's a statewide system, so it's not necessarily a particular state university. So if Florida had one, which I'm not sure if they do or don't, it would be for the state overall's state education system.
So I would have to go to Florida State?
Well, no, you could go to any state university. I think UF is a state university in Florida, though, right?
University of Florida. It's not University of Florida State. Florida State is the enemy, Jason.
Yeah, I know that. But, no, I've been to Gainesville. I've had some fun there. I've visited and had a good time at that campus. But
so Joe, you would have to craft a name for this future kid, like Joseph Jr. Joseph Anderson Jr.
I was going to have it Jason Alan Anderson, but I think that's over with.
Now it's just Alan Anderson.
All right. Last but not least, Mr. Thomas, what is the joke of the day?
Oh my, the joke of the day. You might have caught me again. All right, I'm going to give you guys one about a child. You just mentioned having a kid in the future. So guy rushes into the delivery room. He's angry, and he says, "I can't believe this is the ugliest kid I've ever seen. You cheated on me." And she looks up and says, "Not this time."
Ooh, that's deep.
Jeez. Wow.
This is heavy.
I can't believe this is not my child. Look at how homely it is. You cheated on me.
Not this time.
Yep, nope, this is yours.
This is exactly how you look.
Yeah, Billy, but is not yours, by the way, sir. Since you asked.
Yeah, the good-looking ones. Those are other dads.
All right, Jason, have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for participating in Your Money, Your Wealth.
You too. Thanks, guys.
Keep an eye on yourmoneyyourwealth.com for more college funding information coming soon from Jason Thomas, CFP. In the meantime, if you or someone you know is turning 65, it's time to start navigating the Medicare maze so you can choose the right plan for you at the right cost. The Understanding Medicare video series featuring certified financial planners Joe Anderson and Jason Thomas is available now, free and on demand from the Learning Center at yourmoneyyourwealth.com. We're talking about the A's, B's, C's, and D's of Medicare. We're talking about 11 common Medicare mistakes to avoid. And
we're talking about bridging the gap to Medicare today. And this presentation is for those retiring before the age of 65 that do not have retiree insurance benefits.
Just visit the Learning Center at yourmoneyyourwealth.com to watch the Understanding Medicare video series free on demand. Now it's time to dip into the email bag with financial questions courtesy of Advisor Insights from Investopedia and you, the Your Money, Your Wealth listeners. Joe and Big Al are always willing to answer your money questions. Email info@purefinancial.com or send your questions directly to joe.anderson@purefinancial.com or alan.clopine@purefinancial.com.
This was written, actually not to us. In full disclosure, it was written to USA Today. They didn't realize they could write it to Joe and Al, I guess. This is Charlie. He said, I'm 55 and I plan on retiring in the next 10 years. Could you give me any tips on lowering my taxes in my retirement years? Where would you go with that, Joe?
I don't know. Well, your taxes don't stop when your paycheck does, Charlie. In fact, you have more control over your taxes than any other point in your life.
Yeah, and why is that?
Because you control
the distributions to some extent, right? And that's when you're working. So what control do you have over your salary? Well, you hopefully have a salary, and then you right, in the first place. And then maybe your employer has a 401k or a 403b or something like that. And
if you're an employee, you don't have much.
Not much you can do, right? You can decide, if you have a 401k, you can decide to do I put any in, or I put up to $18,000 in, or if I'm over 50, I can add another $6,000 to that, $24,000. That's your choice, and that's it, right? Now, when you're retired, well, at 70 and a half, you have to take your required minimum distribution out of your IRA. So that's a known. And whenever you sign up for Social Security, the youngest is age 62, the oldest is age 70. The longer you wait, by the way, the bigger the payment's going to be. So in a lot of cases, it does pay to wait if you can afford it. But those things happen. If you have a pension, that comes to you. There's not much control there. But everything else, right? Let's say you're spending $100,000 per year and your Social Security is $30,000, right? You don't have a pension, so you need $70,000 from somewhere. Mm-hmm. Well, you get to decide, do I take that out of my IRA, my 401k, maybe my non-retirement account? We call that non-qualified, my trust account, right? Or maybe my Roth IRA. I got money in a Roth IRA. You get to decide which ones that you pull from, and generally you want to pull from. You want to have a tax plan to figure out. Gosh, if I pull it all out of the IRA, I'm in a really high tax bracket. So maybe some of it should come out of my Roth because that's tax free. Maybe some of it comes out of my trust account because I know that's a lower rate. That's a capital gains rate on the gains. Plus, it's not even all fully taxable because some of that's principal, right. Return of capital to you. And a lot of times we'll see people living in the $100,000 world or $150,000 world, but they're in a very low tax bracket because of the tax planning they did.
You got to map it out first, though.
You do.
Right? So you can't do this. All right, now I'm retired. Where do I go? Well, you want to make sure that you understand, first of all, the planning is you got to look a couple years before you retire. I mean, I suppose you can do it when you retire too, but it works a lot better to say, all right, well, here's what I'm spending today. Here's what I would like to spend in retirement. Yeah, maybe I want to increase that for the first 5-10 years, maybe decrease it, whatever. Map that thing out. right? How much is coming in? How much are you spending? How much are you going to need in savings? And then from there, as Al said, is all right, let's say you need $70,000, $40,000. Then look at where's your assets. Right now, write it down. How much do you have in tax-deferred accounts? How much do you have in non-retirement accounts? And how much do you have in Roth? And I would guess that most of you have most of your money in tax-deferred accounts, unless you're a client of ours, and then you probably have a lot in Roth. But then you have very little control over your taxes at that point, because I don't think they realize, Al, is when you pull money from a retirement account, it's taxed exactly like your paycheck, except for there's no FICA tax. So you pull $100,000 out, it's like you earned a $100,000 salary.
Yeah, same tax brackets.
You got the same brackets on state and federal, and then in some cases you have very little deductions to go against it, so you might even pay more in tax.
Yeah, that's right, Joe. I got a quick example to sort of illustrate this, and this is a taxpayer living on $110,000 of income. And let's just say $20,000 of qualified dividends from their trust account, Social Security $40,000. IRA distributions, $50,000. You add that up, it's $110,000. You look at federal taxes, it's about $9,000. That's the tax on that, and that's all taxed. Well, not all, but most of it taxed at the highest ordinary income rates. Now, you take that same taxpayer, and instead of $50,000 in IRA distributions, it's half of that, $25,000 in IRA distributions and $25,000 in Roth IRA distributions. You're still getting $110,000, but now your federal tax is $3,000. It's 1/3 of the other. And then you're thinking, well, how could that be? Well, first of all, Roth IRA distributions, the $25,000 is tax-free, but it gets better than that because you have less income, because Roth distributions don't count as income, about $10,000 less of your Social Security is taxable because of the way that works. Oh, and by the way, about $5,000 more of your qualified dividends is tax-free as well because you stayed in the 15% tax bracket. So by just having a little change in how you set up your distribution plan, in this example, you cut your taxes by 2/3. And this is what we're talking about. You imagine
75% reduction in your tax bill.
Yeah, 66 and 2/3 actually.
Wow.
Close enough.
70%.
All right. But the point is, if you can do this over a 25, 30-year retirement,
pretty
then
close, whatever.
It's gigantic. Ginormous?
Ginormous.
Is that a word?
All right, that's it for us. For Big Al Clopine, I'm Joe Anderson. The show's called Your Money, Your Wealth. We'll see you again next week. Take care.
So, recapping today's ginormous show. Some of your real estate exchange and retirement savings options may be changing, so make sure to stay on top of the latest tax reform news at yourmoneyyourwealth.com. 529 plans, your own retirement money, and savings bonds are some ways to fund kids' education. Taxes don't stop when your paycheck does. You actually have more control over your taxes in retirement than at any other point in your life. And a visit to yourmoneyyourwealth.com for a free assessment with a certified financial planner can help put you on the right tax track. And Orlando, Atlanta, Scottsdale, and Miami may be great places to retire, but not if you're Joe Anderson. Special thanks to our guests today, Paul Merriman and Jason Thomas. Visit paulmerriman.com, that's PaulMerriman.com, to read more from one of our favorite nationally recognized authorities on mutual funds, index investing, asset allocation, and both buy and hold and active management strategies. And don't forget to visit yourmoneyyourwealth.com to watch the new Understanding Medicare video series from two of our favorite certified financial planners, Jason Thomas and Joe Anderson. Subscribe to the podcast at yourmoneyyourwealth.com through your favorite podcatcher or on iTunes, where you can also check out our ratings and reviews. And remember, this show is all about you. If there's something you want to hear on Your Money, Your Wealth, email us, info@purefinancial.com. Listen next week for more Your Money, Your Wealth, presented by Pure Financial Advisors. Pure Financial Advisors is a registered investment advisor. This show does not intend to provide personalized investment advice through this broadcast and does not represent that the securities or services discussed are suitable for any investor. Investors are advised not to rely on any information contained in the broadcast in the process of making a full and informed investment decision. Your Money, Your Wealth opening song Motown Gold by Carl James Pestka is licensed under a Creative Commons license.